Welcome. I am Connie Haas-Zuber, the Executive Director of Arch, which is the host of this 2024 Fun and Free Lecture Series, which is Arch's gift to the community because it's free. And the reason it can be free is because we have the support of our members and our donors and the sponsors who help make this all happen. This year's sponsors are the Lupke Foundation and Power Components Corporation. And they're helping us pull everything together and make this happen in this lovely place. I want to give special thanks to Cinema Center, which has made it possible for this lecture series to have its most welcoming home yet. And they pulled out the fancy chairs for us today, so it's just really nice. It looks quite uptown, I think, and we're very grateful for that. I'm also very honored and grateful to be able to have this particular topic and this particular presenter be our kickoff event for this year. Microphone is okay. New batteries. Okay, once again, I'm very proud to be here and to have this topic and this presenter to help us start out this year. This topic is a big and important one for Fort Wayne because it is about the future of one of our most important historic buildings. Now you look at it and you think it's new, but this is one of those interesting things about historic preservation. New buildings, meaning different buildings, are becoming officially historic every day. And the Arch United Center has become officially historic. And it's time to look at it and say, we need this building to be with us and to continue to serve the community into the future. What should we do? And that's what's happening now with the Soaring Vision campaign that you all received a brochure about. And that is going to be part of the presentation that you're telling us about it. The rest of the presentation is going to be about the fascinating and wonderful and rich history of this building and its architect. And there is no one, I think, better to tell this story than Miriam Morgan. Her job title is Arch United Vice President of Operations and Chief Operating Officer. Very impressive. She does a wonderful job of it. But to me, what is really important about Miriam and why she's perfect for this is she knows that building. She loves that building and she tells its story really well. So I'm going to stop rambling on and I am going to turn you over to Miriam Morgan to hear her telling of a brief history of Louis I. Kahn and the Fort Wayne Arch United Center. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Connie, for having me. I'm always honored when I get to tell this particular story. It is a rich and varied one, and I'm going to give you a sneak peek at some of the upcoming things that are happening. This is, of course, one of the most unique stories of one of the most unique performing arts centers in the nation. I want to preface this presentation with two things. One, many of the photos and images in this presentation are not mine. And two, I have actually no background in architecture. As you will learn from today, my knowledge of this building and the architect grew from circumstance and curiosity. So the Arts United Center is a unique venue in Northeast Indiana for several reasons. This is an early rendering. If you look at the facade today, you might notice a couple of minor changes. First, it functions differently than other venues in the region. The Embassy, the Clyde, the Honeywell Center, even the St. Francis Performing Arts Center operate primarily like Roadhouse venues, supporting bus and truck type shows that come in. You know, they've been pre-produced and created, and then come in on a truck, perform that night, leave for the next community that after the show closes. In our performing arts theater, however, productions are produced locally. Oftentimes they are built from the ground up by community members, arts organization staffers, and volunteers. Our venue offers an on-site scene shop and spaces to create, build, and rehearse productions from initial auditions to final dress rehearsal. This building is special on many levels, including its architectural significance, as well as its role in the development and growth of our community. Unbeknownst to me, when I began with the organization, when I began with this organization 18 years ago, I did not know that the architect was the most prominent architect of the second half of the 20th century. Louis I. Kahn built this particular venue, and this was his only realized commission in the Midwest and his only performing arts theater in the entire world. But I will come back to that. This is the story of how this venue came to be in Fort Wayne, and it is not only an arts and culture story, but it is also a story of community development. Fort Wayne, 1855 to 1961, and I go back and forth a little bit, so I apologize. So this is a map of the city of Fort Wayne in 1855 that is on the Allen County Historical Society. As many of you know, our city developed around the rivers and the Wabash-Erie Canal, which ran between Superior and Columbia, or just north of the Arts United Center today. In the mid-1800s, the railroad came to Fort Wayne, changing the use of the canal. At that time, the main intersection was at Clinton and Columbia, where the largest bank was located. Within a block, Fort Wayne's first theater and assembly hall stood, which included public baths and showers for a quarter. The Colerick Opera House, which opened in 1853, once stood in Fryman Square at the intersection of Columbia and Barr, approximately where the Helmholtz sculpture is today. The venue capitalized on the booming vaudeville circuit that was first fully equipped, and this was the first fully equipped theater in Indiana. It hosted Edwin Booth, Laura Keene, Buffalo Bill Cody, Tom Thumb, and even Andrew Johnson before he became president. Our community was known at the time as a good theater town. Unfortunately, by 1875, the Opera House was beginning to fall into disrepair, and the large vaudeville acts were passing Fort Wayne because of it. As it fell into disuse, early 20th century movie palaces and stages totaled up to 48 theaters in Fort Wayne by 1920. But none were near the Colerick. It had become a warehouse and was eventually demolished to make room for the theater that we have today. As it fell into this disuse, of course, 20th century movie palaces and stages came to be in Fort Wayne, and I thought you would appreciate seeing a handful of them that used to exist in downtown that included the Majestic Theater, the Colonial Theater, the Palace Theater, the Jefferson, and the Lyric. Of course, the M. Boyd, which is now known as the Embassy, is not on this list here, but it was one of those 48. In a Quest Club paper written by Joseph Dye in 1952, the community's three large arts and culture organizations of the time, the Fort Wayne Art School, the Fort Wayne Musical Society, and the Fort Wayne Civic Theater were all facing operational challenges, inadequate facilities, and the loss of the Palace Theater and the Quimby Auditorium. The dream was to provide adequate combined spaces that would address the various needs for these organizations and smaller cultural clubs, while simultaneously addressing the decline suburbanization had brought to the city's core. With suburbanization growing and portions of downtown falling into disuse, the leaders of our community were looking for new and different ways to develop downtown and saw an opportunity in both the challenges of the current nonprofit organizations as well as the changing downtown landscape. The Nickel Plate Railroad, which replaced the canal, continued to divide the town in half physically, constricting development to the north. As the automobile became more popular, the interstate system began, and it became necessary to relieve the congestion, the traffic delays caused by the rail line. So the elevation of the rail began in 1953, effectively ending the industries along East Main Street. Meetings held by prominent community leaders about the facility challenges and the vision date back to 1948. And in 1955, the Fort Wayne Fine Arts Foundation, now known as Arts United, was founded to address those facilities needs, as well as explore the creation of a united fundraising program. Influential Fort Wayne leaders, including Margaret Ann Keegan, Maxine Jacobs, William Tucker, Sam Ray, Alan McMahon, Helene Follinger, John Schoaf, Irving Latz, Frank Fryman, among others, began meeting to benchmark cultural centers and their organizational structures across the nation, which might be used as a model for downtown Fort Wayne. By 1959, the city's redevelopment commission was formed, and their first redevelopment commission project was identified to address the declines suburbanization had brought, particularly in the East Main Street area, which spanned from Calhoun to the river and from Maine to Superior, all along the elevated rail line. A portion of this area was designated for the Fort Wayne Fine Arts Foundation to develop this cultural center downtown, which is the green and tan areas, and planning began in earnest. This is Columbia Street looking east from Clinton, which is the future site of Fryman Square. The leaders in our community looked at plans at Lincoln Center in New York City and discussed with John D. Rockefeller III how to land bank properties to develop a cultural center. Together with leaders from arts organizations, which included Colin Worth and Dick Casey, our community leaders outlined an objective for a cultural center, and the Fine Arts Foundation set about searching for an architect of prominence which would bring new life into the community through their design. Legend has it that building committee members flew around the country in a Magnavox jet, visiting the built sites of various architects of the day. They interviewed the most prominent individuals, including Eero Saarinen, Mies van der Rohe, Edward Stone, I.M. Pei, and Philip Johnson. They would settle on Louis I. Kahn, who was emerging in the latter half of his career as a new visionary in the American architecture scene. Kahn was selected in 1961 and set about designing a center that met the needs outlined by the community and the foundation. And he said, these organizations of the arts, when they come together to be a single center, does it mean something new is born? I recalled that it does, simply by their being together rather than being apart. So he set about arranging a group of buildings that related to each other in both proximity and design. During the 11-year process, the plan went through multiple iterations, including numerous structures and arrangements that included a 25-seat symphony hall, a music annex, a larger theater than the one we have today, skipped on me, sorry about that, an outdoor amphitheater, an art school, an art museum, a history museum, and an administrative building. So my curiosity got the best of me. When I began working for Arts United 18 years ago, I did not set out with the intention of becoming the historian for this venue. It happened rather organically. What I didn't know when I was beginning work with Arts United was that this theater was globally and architecturally significant. This building attracts international tourists on a regular basis. They arrive without fanfare, and they are often without calling ahead. They never intend to impose, but they are always insistent about just getting a small glimpse of our one-of-a-kind building. Visitors from France, Turkey, Japan, and Sweden have arrived in Fort Wayne just to see our venue, and they always tell me the same story. We're only in the States for a week. We drove down from Chicago to see this building. Please let us in. They grasp at the grand sense of the spaces and the voluminous rooms that we provide, and they gently run their fingers across the carefully crafted and exceptionally smooth concrete. They look at the building differently than performance patrons, admiring the brickwork to construct the jack arches and curved arches, like this one that you see here in one of our rehearsal halls, and this very unique door. They comment on the natural light which floods the public spaces of the building during the day and creates patterns and shapes throughout our south-facing venue. And most of all, they comment on Louis I. Kahn. Louis Isidore Kahn, the Jewish-American architect of our theater. So I had to understand why all these people came to our venue. I spent time poring through the dusty archive which is our construction archive that I had located in the basement of our mechanical room. And I watched online source documentaries and video clips of him, and slowly I learned that our modest venue was anything but that in the world of architecture. Kahn was a professor of architecture at Yale and the University of Pennsylvania. He began our project very late in his career, yet during the span of more than 10 years that he worked on the Arts Center vision for Fort Wayne, he was also working on 5 architectural masterpieces. He won the American Institute of Architects Gold Medal and the Royal Institute of British Architects Gold Medal. He was arguably the foremost living American architect of his era. He was born in Estonia in 1901. At the age of 3, he found himself moving to the United States, and his family settled in the Philadelphia area. He was fascinated by natural light, and especially the light of coals in his fireplace. And when he was young, he took one of those coals out of the fire, caught his apron on fire, and badly scarred one side of his entire face. He would use those coals to sketch and draw pictures when he was young. His parents were both artists, and so that was, his intent as well. He aspired to be an artist until his senior year in high school, when he took an architecture class and fell in love with the profession. His passion for art and music is what I think uniquely tied Kahn to the facilities for the fine arts, which he designed. He graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 1924, and a few years later, he took an extended tour of Europe, in which his sketches and studies of medieval French walled city, Scottish castles, and on later trips, Greek, Roman, and Egyptian architecture would influence his work. These are 2 of the watercolors and pastels that he did. He was an artist first. His masterpieces and his impact on the School of Architecture would transcend his life and continue to impact generations of architects. His university lectures would capture the imaginations of his students, and he would often confound them with his rather esoteric concepts. He would talk to his materials, he would tell his students, most notably brick, and he would say, "Brick, what do you want to be?" And a brick would say, "Well, Kahn, I want to be an arch." And Kahn would say, "But brick, a concrete lentil is so much less expensive. What do you think of that, brick?" And a brick would say, "I want to be an arch." And so Kahn would intentionally build arches out of brick in his structures. Or he would say, "Every building must have its own soul." Or, "Architecture emerges from the instinct to express." Or, of our theater here, "To look for the spirit and find it is the key, I think," he would say, "to serving the realm of spaces known as the theater. The sacred space here is the place of the actor, the dressing rooms, the rehearsal room. The dressing room has a balcony overlooking the stage. There is a relationship between this and the stage you see. As soon as I bunched everything together, it became a sacred space." His notable masterpieces, all of which were in various stages of concept to construction during his 11 years of work in Fort Wayne, include the Salk Institute for Biological Studies in La Jolla, California, comprised of 2 large laboratory blocks which frame a plaza and a view of the Pacific Ocean and North America. Of it, he would say, the scientists snugly isolated from all other mentalities needed more than anything the presence of the unmeasurable. The Yale Center for British Art. The Yale Center for British Art, which was the school where Kahn began his teaching career in 1947, is home to 2 of his museums. This is the most prominent of those 2. Here, as in many of his buildings, the mechanical components of his facility are cleverly hidden. Kahn would say, "I do not like ducts. I do not like pipes. I hate them really thoroughly, but because I hate them so thoroughly, I feel that they have to be given their place. If I just hated them and I took no care, I think that they would invade the building and completely destroy it." Of this gallery, Kahn hoped visitors would feel that they were in a comfortable house. The Indian Institute of Management. The Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad, India, is a 60-acre campus comprised of classrooms, a library, administrative offices, and dormitories. Kahn would say he had patterned it after Harvard and centered his feelings on a monastery. He worked to create an atmosphere where students would feel living and learning were not separate. His effort to begin at the essence of a solution by asking what a space wanted to be was evident in his thoughts about the school. Schools began, Kahn would say, or mused to his students, with a man under a tree who did not know he was a teacher, discussing his realizations with a few others who did not know they were students. The Phillips Exeter Academy Library. The Phillips Exeter Academy Library is in Exeter, New Hampshire. Of it, Kahn would say, "A man with a book goes to the light. A library begins that way." At Exeter, he created 2 donuts, his words, not mine, one of the brick exterior, which housed the naturally lit, well-lit reading spaces, and one of concrete on the dimmer interior, which housed the book stacks. The Kimball Art Museum. The Kimball Art Museum in Fort Worth, Texas, which held its dedication in the same month as Exeter's library, was designed to suggest Roman architecture using light as a theme. The Kimball captures the natural light of all of the subtle hourly changes throughout the building through a unique solenoid vault and aluminum reflector system to indirectly illuminate the art in the galleries and allow visitors to still sense the time of day. The Bangladesh National Assembly Building Complex in Dhaka, Bangladesh. The National Assembly Building Complex in Dhaka, which covers 200 acres and includes the parliamentary buildings, support buildings, and offices, is considered by many to be his magnum opus. Commissioned in 1962 and completed after his death in 1982, its total cost was a little more than $32 million. It is likely the best example of his concept of ruins in reverse, where the exterior structure creates a shelter to the interior building and spaces. A concept that he also used in Fort Wayne. As you can see here, this is the interior chamber, and it is isolated from the exterior elements, the same diffused natural light from above. His ability to span the archaic to modern was unique and new, and his pursuit of volume 0, that is the missing first book in the encyclopedia, which provides the essence of form, truly set him apart. The honorable mentions. His largest and most notable structures were all of civic and institutional purpose and completed or in process in the last 23 years of his life. Of Kahn, I.M. Pei would say most architects are lucky if they have one masterpiece, and Kahn had 5 in the last decade of his career. Those include the Yale Art Gallery, these notable structures. Not all of these were completed in that last decade. The ones previous were. This is the Yale University Art Gallery, so this is his first art gallery of the 2. The Richards Medical Laboratories at the University of Pennsylvania. The Trenton Bath House in New Jersey. And completed posthumously in 2012, the Four Freedoms Park in New York City. So about our theater. Kahn was captivated by relationships, their parts and their sum, or as he called it, order. Here is one of his plaster models of his studies for the Fort Wayne Fine Arts Center. This one happens to be at the MoMA. The order between buildings within the city and buildings to each other and rooms among each other and humans among all of those was of keen interest to him. This is an excerpt from one of his sketchbooks. The auditorium of our theater reflects this. Here we have tiered continental-style seating where every patron has a clear view of the stage, forced perspective for an intimate experience between audience and performer, and no center aisle. Kahn's thoughts of collective behavior and humans gathering together can be seen throughout his notes and sketches. He considered the street, the room, and the human arrangement when visualizing an arts complex in which the various structures, the symphony hall, the music annex, the theater, the experimental theater, the art school, the art museum, the history museum, the amphitheater, offices, and a lecture hall, all which sat in relation to each other with outdoor pedestrian spaces between them. He considered even a street to be a room. He would say, in a small room, one does not say what one would say in a large room, and thoughts exchanged by one and other are not the same in one room as they are in another. The majority of his conceptual plan drawings and models for the Fine Arts Center now reside at the Chicago Art Institute, but can also be found at the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Pennsylvania's Architectural Archives and at the Museum of Modern Art. However, Kahn presented the plan to the building committee. There was a large cost discrepancy. Presenting his plan, which spanned along Main Street from Clinton to Lafayette, the plan in totality, he estimated, would have cost approximately $20 million. And the committee had only planned to spend $2 million. That discrepancy would spur plan changes and scope reductions, as well as 2 capital campaigns, the first of which was the largest that Fort Wayne had ever undertaken to date, over the next several years to bring this theater to reality. Eventually, the multi-facility cultural complex was a fine arts school and then a theater, and ultimately, only the theater remained. This is Kahn on stage on grand opening week. I can only imagine some of the disappointment Kahn likely felt when the complex was pared down to the structure that we have today. To him, the structures and relationships between them comprised as a whole where the structures were answerable to each other. Of the Fort Wayne financial dilemma, he would famously say, "I realized something that I've never realized before. There are actually 2 realities an architect deals with. One is the reality of belief, and the other is the reality of means." Kahn envisioned our Performing Arts Center as a violin inside a violin case, to shelter the auditorium from the noise and vibration of the elevated rail which runs directly north of the building. Of the venue, he would say, if you were to realize a philharmonic hall, you would say that music is only partially important. Seeing a person becoming entranced is also important. Seeing the entire hall, not to be forced by its shape and look at it from under a balcony, but to feel the entire chamber is like living in a violin. You can come to the realization that you are making a musical instrument containing people. His concepts for the performance venue, as noted in Architecture and Context publication titled Louis Kahn in the Midwest, were more closely related to the perceptions of the theater goer than of the theater practitioner. Kahn's commanding style and designs, which were inspired by the monuments of ancient Greece and Rome, embody a sense of monumentality he was striving to convey. He intended his buildings to be unadorned, to be honest in the way that they were constructed. He revered natural light on natural materials and preferred to be informed by his materials on how they should be applied. The exterior columns which process up the grand staircases reference his reverence of the Parthenon, and on the interior become folded concrete walls to break up acoustic reflection and showcase Kahn's preference of concrete as the most perfect construction material, or molten stone, as he would call it. The venue, being perceived as much smaller on the exterior than on the interior, houses not only the auditorium and stage, but a ballroom gallery space on the second floor, dressing rooms, green room, scene shop, costume shop, and administrative offices for Arts United's venues and facilities teams, the Fort Wayne Civic Theater's production staff, Fort Wayne Youth Theater, and others. It also houses 2 large rehearsal rooms. Within Kahn's context of served and servant spaces, he designed all spaces behind the stage to be actor's house, where the various needs of an actor prior to, during, and immediately following a performance could be met. Kahn considered the theater venue as important to the ticket holder's experience as the performance itself. And those 2 components, in my opinion, created the sum experience. The auditorium, as it is situated, allows there to be an intimate experience between audience member and performer. And spoken word can be heard from stage, even in the rearmost row, without amplification. It is as if Kahn understood that theatrical performances utilize forced perspective as a way to convey a story, and the building itself can create a form of forced perspective to convey an experience. The theater planner on this project, George Eisenhower, undoubtedly influenced some of the venue's design and the theatrical mechanical components. George was a pioneer in the theatrical design and technology industry. He was a professor of drama at Yale and the founder of their electromechanical laboratory, holding approximately 18 patents. George was also an accomplished inventor, and he developed electronic dimming systems for stage lighting. He was a pioneer in digitally controlled automated lighting and digitally controlled scenic automation, both systems which developed into the modern automated lighting and automated rigging systems we know today and we will see in this venue in the future. Curiously, however, Kahn, having no formal training in the theatrical arts, seemed to have understood, perhaps better than those who contracted him, that the building needed to be about the gathering of a community. The formal singular entrance indicates that perception, and it references his earlier intention for the arts complex to have a singular point of entry, as he called it, a court of entrances. On any given day, one can stand alone in the lobbies and watch the changing daylight pass through the venue and observe the silence Kahn spoke of during his visit to the pyramids, how silence is also communicative. And every afternoon and evening, one can observe the gathering of the community for shared experiences, for rehearsals, classes, and events. Groundbreaking occurred in 1971, and the 3-year construction period allowed the auditorium chamber to be poured in place. The outer lobby wrapped around it to insulate it from the exterior noise, otherwise ruins in reverse. 2 capital campaigns, the first of which, like I said, was the largest Fort Wayne had ever undertaken to date, were executed, and when the building was complete, its cost was nearly $4.5 million. Kahn was present for the grand opening week at the end of September in 1973. He would give a lecture and a tour. In fact, he commented it was the first time he had visited the site in quite some time, because when he was asked to present his work, he says he is not able to easily express to him that which is unmeasurable. As a theater at its core must support the creation and delivery of stories communicated between audiences and performers. Kahn would tell the audience present at grand opening, "I think there is a reason for living is to express, and to express that which is fundamentally inexpressible." This building was the last grand opening of Kahn structures he would attend. He passed away in March of 1974, and while some of his other masterpieces were completed posthumously, and our theater does not grace that list, it is his one and only performing arts theater. Today, the theater continues to serve as the community's venue. It hosts theatrical performances, concerts, ballets, weddings, community gatherings, formal civic ceremonies, competitions, educational events, theatrical and dance classes, performance rehearsals, scenic and costume construction, and so much more. It functions in a complementary role to regional venues which host touring productions by providing the opportunity for the community to gather, collaboratively building artistic performances and creating new experiences together from the ground up, all within a professional venue setting. This is where new art, New artists, new performers, and new patrons are born from shared experiences. In many ways, it is a community center disguised as a theater, a center for gathering, a notion Kahn noted in his textbooks and notebooks. For me, the parallels drawn between Kahn's original vision for the Fine Arts Center, his concepts of collective experience, the current arts campus arrangement, and our day-to-day operations are actually striking. As he so eloquently put in a 1963 notebook, there is an entity present. The Philharmonic is dependent on the art school, and the art school is dependent on the civic theater, and the civic theater on the ballet, and so on. I have found the extra quality which makes the coming together more than when the buildings are separated from each other. This venue is where relationships are formed, talents are discovered, skills are honed, and civil discourse is held. As the flagship facility of Arts Campus Fort Wayne, the theater has seen the district grow over the past 40 years into a truly local version of Kahn's original vision. The venue was later joined by the History Center in 1980, the Fort Wayne Museum of Art in 1984, this structure, the Hall Community Arts Center in 1991, the Rankin House in 2010, and the Auer Center for Arts and Culture in 2011, and the construction of the Parkview Physicians Group Arts Lab Experimental Theater in 2014. This cultural district, known as Arts Campus Fort Wayne, is the center of arts and culture in our region as Kahn originally conceptualized it. Today, the 12 arts and culture organizations headquartered on the campus present local and regional work, collaborate and share resources, and Arts United, through private ownership and management of 4 campus facilities, subsidizes leases and stage licensing, providing theatrical expertise and equipment, and centralizes a variety of high-value, cost-saving services for arts and culture located both in the district and regionally. However, our flagship venue now faces challenges from aging infrastructure and lack of accessibility as it was constructed prior to the Americans with Disabilities Act. Consideration for broad access across the entire facility is imperative, not only accessibility for patrons, but for performers and theatrical practitioners of every skill level. Currently, we are nearing the completion of a $40 million capital campaign. Renovation of this theater is paramount. Its aging infrastructure and technology currently restricts creativity and usability, as well as the access challenges which threaten its stability. Our venue is the centerpiece of many community organizations' activities and programs, both indoor and outdoor, and any modifications made must be done in the context of greater community connectivity and preservation of our internationally renowned landmark. With community input and support, we have sought to continue to provide a useful and accessible venue in which all individuals of the community can participate, gather together, create, and collaborate, as well as a downtown arts campus which can continue to attract local, regional, and national activity. I'm going to bring a slideshow up for all of you. I'm going to play for you our campaign video that I brought along today. Hopefully the sound works.
I just think story is so important. It presents so many different points of view. That's where we get our compassion in life, is that we learn other people's story.
The arts provide us opportunities to be educated, to be entertained, to expand our world vision, to learn about other cultures.
I'll never forget just being mesmerized by this show. Your parents might take you to like Blue's Clues Live at the embassy, but there's just something about this community show that you watch. These people that are just in your town doing the show completely for free, and they're putting their heart and soul into this. I knew that I wanted to be on that stage at some point as a kid.
We can bring together people that act and people that work behind the stage and bring stories to life. What a great thing for Fort Wayne.
This theater is sort of an anchor and is certainly the center of the cultural activity in Fort Wayne.
I didn't know where we would fit in 13 years ago, but now I really can't imagine our lives without being a part of Fort Wayne Ballet.
We nurture souls, we build self-esteem, we create an environment of teamwork, team building, and solving.
It teaches me how to communicate and work together.
A thriving arts community is the heartbeat of the community. We give dimension and shape, diversity, and all of those things are critical.
I did my first show here when I was 15, just 2 years after the building was built. It was exciting, and the building was brand new.
The fact that it was designed by Kahn and people from all over the world have actually come to see this building. What a treasure we have here.
It's a great building, but it's a building of its time from 1970. At 50 years of age, it needs some work done on it so that we can go the next 50 years.
It's about access, and theater is truly for everyone. Right now, in its current format, people with a physical mobility issue or impairment aren't really able to participate fully.
We have had to carry a stage manager who was wheelchaired all the way up those stairs to have access and participate in our shows. We won't have to do that anymore.
A lot of people that are able to give their time as a volunteer might be a little bit older or retired or whatever, and we really need a way to be able to get them into the building and maybe not have so many stairs and just, make the bathrooms accessible, all those things.
People look at this campaign as a building campaign, a campaign specifically to renovate a building, but it's really an investment in the community and its people.
We're going to be very true to Kahn's ideas. We're going to retrofit the light fixtures. We're going to see this building kind of in all of its initial glory.
The demands on the industry and the technology now, and part of that renovation, is key to keeping up with today's standards.
The technology is pretty outdated. The building was opened 50 years ago and not much has changed in that time. We have a lot of updating to do.
The plan is not just to preserve the building, but to bring it into this century and to make it support the arts community in a more holistic way than what it does today.
We're leaving a legacy. We're continuing these programs so that they'll be here for the next 20, 50, 100 years.
It's amazing what we have here.
And I think you have to really look at it and say, I want more organizations to be able to use that same great resource, that same great space.
We've all seen just in the last 5 years a tremendous change, in the people that are moving in, that are staying here, and I believe we need to support that, and I think arts is a big part of that.
You're not just investing in an organization, you're investing in our future leaders. That's what this campus does. It builds pillars in the community. It builds upstanding adults.
This building was built by the community, for the community, and should represent the community.
So where are we going? This venue requires access for all. So connectivity and elevated community experience are part of that story. This is a view of the future from Fryman Square that shows the expansion towards the northwest rear of the building that provides a lobby and a gathering space for the classes, camps, and activities that happen in the studio spaces year-round at the back of the building that most people are not even aware of. It provides a formal place to gather and better access to those studio spaces. As the building was built pre-ADA, most of the spaces are accessed via stairs. There is one one elevator at the front of the building that goes to the ballroom level, but all other access points require stairs. And so there's a physical challenge to this particular building that we will be addressing. And so in the future, that lobby extension that you see on the Fryman Square side will do a couple of things. It will allow us to more intentionally integrate into the park and generate new park experiences, providing background support for art in the park and shows in the park and concerts in the park, that sort of thing. But it will also really allow people to utilize the studio spaces and access them in a really good and intentional way, providing an elevator to that level that never existed when the building was constructed, and a formal staircase. The other thing this provides is drop-off for individuals attending performances. This is actually facing south, and so the window at the end of this hallway actually connects to the auditorium exterior doors here. So vehicles could drop off patrons and have them enter the auditorium from a new way, which allows covered access and just makes it easier to get into the auditorium spaces. The renovation also provides dynamic flexibility. As you heard in the campaign video, the technology in this building is a bit outdated. I like to tell people it's about the same age as Apollo era infrastructure, so if you can imagine connecting your cell phone into something that came from the Apollo era, those are some of the challenges that the technical theater individuals have in this venue. But it'll also provide new patron experiences and practitioner experiences throughout the venue. In these images, you can see a couple of the challenges that we have on stage. So this is essentially the same view in the future and as we are today. One of the interesting things that we'll be doing in this venue is an automated rigging system for this venue for a couple of reasons. Right now, everyone has to climb that spiral staircase right now to get to a second floor level and has to have the upper body strength and mobility to be able to move curtains and backdrops on stage for something like, say, Nutcracker. In the future, that will all be automated through a motorized rigging system, which will allow someone at even a desk and a wheelchair to be able to operate all of that without all of the physical upper body strength. So we're really excited about that. So that's kind of what you're seeing here. This is, of course, an architect's rendering of that, but this the change to that side of stage allows a handful of things, including additional storage, larger scenic pieces to be deployed on stage, and automates all of that rigging, which is really exciting. The rehearsal hall level that I talked about earlier, the studio spaces, they're not accessible right now other than via a staircase that is basically a service staircase. And we will be adding that formal staircase and a passenger elevator to get up to those levels. And so as we were engaging community constituents in this planning process, we said, what else would you like to see? And many individuals said, well, we would really love to be able to have smaller style flexible performances. So these spaces will now be able to be utilized not only for the rehearsals that they will continue to support throughout the year, and the classes and the camps that they support throughout the year, but they will also have the technology and the upgrades and the modernization required to be able to do small lectures, small children's performances, recitals, and things like that. The determination and visionary work of Fort Wayne leaders, which began in 1948, carried a plan forward that ultimately gave our community one of the most unique structures in the world, which we can all be proud of. In my humble opinion, we owe it to the leaders of the 50s and 60s, to Kahn, and to our community today to continue their vision of a regional center for arts and culture, which is an integral part of downtown development, neighborhood identity, and human connectivity. As Paul Finch, program director for the World Architecture Festival, has eloquently said, architecture and the built environment are key elements of the transmission of cultural identities from one generation to the next. Indeed, a place like Kahn's Performing Arts Center, our community's venue, cultivates both a sense of community and of identity, a sense of not only our past, but also of our future. Thank you.
very much, Miriam. You packed a lot into not very long. I want to note that just like Arch gave all of you the opportunity to become a member and help support the lecture series, Arch, because of the support for this lecture series, is able to give honoraria to our presenters. But we're doing it a special way this time, and we are giving the honorarium to Miriam, who, as a donation to the Soaring Vision campaign.
Oh, thank you.
It's one thing we can do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But Arch is very, very happy to be a part of the arts campus and to be a part of this energy that is happening, and just the community of arts and cultural organizations here. So I will now go back to the originally scheduled programming and say, if you have questions for Miriam, now's the time to ask them.
Yes.
Do they have any ideas how they will get patrons up into the theater?
Yes. Yes. So, so the current plan includes increased accessible seating in the front rows of the auditorium, as well as into the back of the auditorium. Originally, this orchestra lift area, which is about 13 feet deep, 60 feet wide, and is a large hydraulic elevator, originally it was able to be lowered, and about 100 additional seats were originally allowed to be rolled out onto it. Those wagons still exist, the seats are gone, so we will be reactivating those in the future, and we will add accessible seating to those as well. That was a George Eisenhower piece of the design. Yes, sorry.
Over the years, has there been any conversation of adding the buildings over time that he envisioned originally?
The community changed over time, and that's part of the story of this. And as the community changed, you know, we all adapted. So, you know, the Embassy Theater was in disrepair, and as many of you know the story of the wrecking ball and the stopping of that. So, you know, the orchestra played a really large part in saving the Embassy by returning performances there. They had performed there really early, and then they had left and started performing at like the Scottish Rite Auditorium and other places. But they were part of, you know, rescuing the Embassy Theater, and so as a result of that, the 2,500 seat Symphony Hall that was originally planned for this campus never, you know, really materialized. The second building in Kahn's plan that was slated to be constructed, which we actually have pretty decent plans for, I would say they're probably at the design development level of plans, was the Fort Wayne Fine Arts School. But the Fort Wayne Fine Arts School split before that building was realized and became the Museum of Art and the Purdue, you know, Arts School. So, you know, plans changed and things evolved. And we never really lost sight of that idea of a collection of arts and culture amenities together in Fort Wayne. It's just been realized a bit differently. And so, you know, he had an experimental style theater, you know, on his original master plan, and we did develop that in 2014. It just happens to be across the street attached to our Center for Arts and Culture, which was originally the NIPSCO headquarters that we renovated for, you know, for arts and culture organizations downtown. So we've adapted the plan over time. I think there are challenges to operating an internationally recognized facility. And of course, you know, this building cost was a significant cost just because of the type of construction materials and the way that it was constructed. 3 years is a long construction period, all of that specially formulated concrete that included like volcanic ash and all of those sorts of things, you know, just add an expense to it that, you know, there might be different ways to approach collecting arts and culture facilities together, and so we just did it differently over, you know, over the last 50 years. Yes?
What's the proposed timeline for these improvements?
Sure. We expect construction to begin this June, and and because of the complexity of this venue and modernizing it, performing arts theaters, as many of you likely know, are like a Swiss watch, and so everything is interconnected, and you can't, you know, just change, a light in the lobby without it impacting something in the auditorium, and you can't change something in the auditorium without it impacting something in a dressing room and so forth. So in order to really address a performing arts center in the most appropriate way, as efficiently as possible, we'll be closing the venue for about 15 to 18 months. And so all of our resident performing organizations are going to go on tour and go and perform at other venues around the community and around the region, which we think is really exciting because it'll allow new audiences to engage with them in different ways. And we're really excited about them returning when we reopen the building in about 15 to 18 months. Yes?
I noticed in the rendering photograph of the new portion to be built facing west at Fryman Square. What was the thinking process to not keep in mind using brick as a financial one, or for the aesthetics look of it?
Sure. So architecture, we've been guided very carefully by architectural preservationists who have said the best thing to do in this particular case is to not try to replicate anything of Kahn's or look like Kahn's structure. And I can probably go back a handful of slides to that drawing and talk about it for you. I missed it. There we are. Okay. So instead of duplicating or attempting to look very similar to the building, it's been very intentional on the part of the architect, which is MKM Architecture, for the community to know what is different about, what was added to the Kahn structure, and to try to be as sympathetic to the front-facing facade, the south facade, as possible. But also do it with great intention. And so if you recall the pictures from the Yale Center for British Art, it has exterior metal cladding in panels. That's very similar to this new structure here. And the dimensions and forms that divide all of the materials on this new expansion also reference the same dimensions as the theater. So you might notice that this large rectangular box is approximately the same as that glass area in the new lobby. The other interesting thing I think that this does, and I don't have a rendering of it for you today, but the other thing that I think that is really interesting about this is most of that is glass. And so at night, you will be able to see into that lobby and see the original existing windows on the original facade of the building. So it will look like a jewel box. Kahn very intentionally, wanted that violin inside the violin case concept in this theater. And if you can look through even the existing windows today, you can see the interior concrete interior structure. And so this kind of does the same thing in that particular way, and really showcases the liveliness that is within the building as opposed to just highlighting the exterior facade.
How far north is that extension going to take up really the back parking lot, north parking lot?
Actually, it does not. It only extends really to the rear of the building. So, Other questions?
You're probably losing a lot of revenue when you shut down for those months, right? For not having the civic there and the ballet there.
There is of course a little bit of disruption, but we've planned for that, and that's all been budgeted into the entire process. So.
Is there any sound upgrade going to be made in the?
I'm so glad you asked. So technical theater and production is my background. I'm a theatrical lighting designer by trade. So everything, related to theatrical production and technology is, kind of my baby. And this theater is going to get all of those modernization updates that it requires, including, modernized hearing assist system, accessibility upgrades in those particular ways. But yes, sound, lighting, automated rigging, all of those components that allow theatrical productions to be really quite something. Modern theatrical performances, like things that you might see performed on Broadway or whatever, require certain technological components that this theater sort of constricts. And so when our regionally producing companies want to do something something on that level of caliber, sometimes they have to be a little inventive or creative, or sometimes they have to cut things down a little bit because of the constrictions of the technology right now. As I said, it's like it's 1960s technology and infrastructure in this building. And while it was new and modern at the time, because George Eisenhower was was the head of the electromechanical laboratory, and he actually installed his original lighting console in our venue. The first prototype was installed at Yale. The second prototype was installed in our venue. It was noted in the newspaper as being the most modern, technologically controlled theater of its time at the moment that it opened. But of course, a lot of those things remained. Even if the light console was replaced, all of the cables and everything that connected it still remained. And so, we've adapted over time, but there's still constrictions. So yes, all of the technology is being upgraded in this venue.
I was just selfishly thinking about where, I can't remember what you call it, but hearing aids could pick up the sound system.
Hearing loop, yes. And there are a variety of different options and devices that allow us to do that. We have a really great theatrical designing and planning team, DLR group out of Cleveland, that does theatrical planning, audiovisual planning, lighting, acoustics, and they have been working with our team and our theatrical technical director and others to ensure that we install the appropriate technology for this venue. One of the challenges with this venue is a giant, it's a giant Faraday cage. And so that, that's great for maybe constricting cell phone usage in the building, but maybe not so great for some of the technology you need to, be able to provide access. So there are a number of ways to address that. There's several different types of systems, not just hearing loops, that are out there today. And systems that connect to people's cell phones that provide descriptive services, whether it's on a cell phone or a provided device by the venue. So we've looked into all of those various components to provide accessibility. Yes?
I may have missed it, but did you address the marquee? Why is the marquee not included?
The marquee we actually have a plan for replacing exterior signage, and that plan is in process now. It may or may not be executed exactly at the same time, but it is part of the plan. Yes?
Mine is more of an arch question.
Sure.
Now that you've whet our whistles, our appetites, when do we get to, are there tours available before it goes into renovations?
I would be happy to provide a tour. I think Connie and I can probably figure out a time and post that online, and I'd be happy to do that. Tours take about 90 minutes, but it is a phenomenal tour.
To really get to see up close all the places in the violin.
Because there's nothing more fun than to hit the backstage when you only see the front of the house, to be able to, how does the magic happen?
I usually tell people on those tours, once they've seen, the lobbies and the auditorium and the ballroom upstairs, well, you've seen about a third of the building.
Everything from the spiral staircase to the orchestra lift, and yes.
Yeah.
And way up high.
Could they tie that in with the Be a Tourist in your hometown?
We have long wanted to do that. The challenge for us is scheduling. There is usually a performance group that is loading in or producing that day, and so that's usually, unfortunately, a bit of a challenge. But we're always happy to provide tours when people request them. Yes?
Can you address how the changes will affect parking, and in particular pedestrians getting from the building to their parking, and the safety in the back? Currently, there's blind spots for cars and pedestrians.
Sure. We're looking at changes to transportation and access into this building. And it requires a collaborative work with the city, of course, and with others. But there's some really interesting things happening right now that will just ultimately change how people access this building. First, this expansion on this side really connects to the park and provides a visual connection from the park to the Rousseau Center parking garage, which is a half a block from here. So that's, another 500 or so spaces. That's really great. It also resides along the Barr Street corridor, which is a very heavily pedestrianized corridor. We've been very careful to maintain that so that pedestrians can use it year-round. But it goes straight over to Club Soda, and as you know, the large Barrett Stokely project is happening right there, which also includes a very large parking garage. So we can really envision patrons parking in that garage and walking to the campus in that particular way. And then, the intersection of Main and Barr years ago, before this project, before this building came into existence, was actually signalized. And we have had discussions about how do we make access across the campus from one side of Main Street to the other more safe for pedestrians with the city. So all of that is still in process, but we are very keenly aware of the developments going into our neighborhood to ensure that we are addressing access for both pedestrians and vehicles. Yes?
What can we do to help the city realize the importance of that? Like crossing Clinton there to the Rousseau parking is not possible.
Sure. That's a really great question. If I would pose it, I would, make sure that you communicate that to the city. There are people in transportation that would welcome hearing those kinds of comments. Yeah.
I might also recommend that you talk to your district city council person and to the city council people at large, to know that you have concerns about this, you're interested in it, you're watching it, and you want them to watch it because here's what you want to have happen.
Thank you. Yes. Yep.
They're very effective advocates for citizen concerns of those sorts.
They really are. Yes.
By chance, is there any future expansion in reference to the trustee office and the party of art building with the elevation being there as far as expanding, keeping everything on that block? That's what I'm trying to say. Is there any?
I'm not aware of anything happening either to the Party Apart building or the trustee building at this particular time. As you likely know, along Superior Street, they are doing a trail, a city cultural trail that extends from Promenade Park all the way over to Lafayette, and this pedestrian corridor intersects with it, and so this will make a really nice pedestrian connectivity point for people to get around on the north side of downtown. But to my knowledge, there is not any changes to either of those properties.
I don't know of any of them either. And, pardon me, I'm bouncing back to your question about getting across Clinton Street. The city is also very interested about connectivity between the landing and the arts campus in this area. So you might want to add that to your list of interests you share with the city council people, because getting across Clinton is possible at the Main Street corner because it's signalized.
Right.
But it's, it's extra walking. And during the Through Festival, they kind of make it easier for people to cut across right where the parking garage is. But that doesn't happen all year. And a lot of times when people are going to this building, it's dark out. Mm-hmm. So it makes it even dicier to try to jaywalk there, frankly. So yeah, tell city council people and ask them to advocate for you, because they're very good at that. And they know the exact right people to talk to.
And I don't.
Yes.
It seems like just recently we've finally gotten everybody to be selling their tickets out there at the box office, the Arts United box office.
Mm-hmm.
Where will we be buying tickets now?
Sure. The box office will temporarily move across the street to the Auer Center for Arts and Culture and be on the first floor there, and will remain there for the duration of the project. Mm-hmm.
Good question. Lots of practical questions and then some interesting
On various levels, yes, and it just depends on their particular sophistication level and what they're looking for. We provide a lot of background support for these organizations that a lot of people are perhaps not aware of. Usually when you want to put on a theatrical production, you rent a stage, then you have to rent equipment, lights, sound, all of those sorts of things. We do, all of that is like packaged together at this particular venue and then heavily subsidized for promotion of locally produced things. And so we understand that disrupting that is a challenge. And so among the things that we are able to do is allow those organizations to utilize the equipment that they've used all along, but in different venues. We have professional theater technicians on our staff who are helping people navigate some of the complexity of going and performing at other venues. We provide backstage support for them in some ways. We have located or helped identify storage facilities, because storage of scenic items is a big piece, and so we have some shared facilities that we're doing that in. So a variety of different ways, and everything that we do is adapted to each organization because they're all unique, and so it's kind of hard to answer, but yes, we've been doing that. Yeah, no, it's fine.
When the Philharmonic decided to leave the embassy and go to Purdue, I understand that some of the surrounding businesses downtown thought they were going to be losing, revenue that they used to get from the concert to go where it's going to the embassy. Do they have the same feeling of impact when all of a sudden the Civic Theater is going to be not having a normal flow of entertainment on weekend nights?
I have not heard of any concerns like that. And I think part of that is because the rest of the arts campus is still going to be up and operational. The Arts Lab, Black Box Theater, the experimental style theater will still be operating and holding performances. The ballet will still be hosting their academy year-round that sees something in the neighborhood of 400 families every single week, coming to the Hour Center. The History Center, the other organizations on campus are all going to be continuing activity. So I don't really see, and we have not heard any concerns like that. Yes?
Another arch question. As we understand that St. Francis is wanting to get out of their theater building there on Berry and Fairfield, the old Sky Shrine, what is Arch's possibility of getting involved in that, and how? I mean, it's a big project, I know that.
Arch is already involved. We've been talking with them for quite a while. They know that we are concerned, supportive, would like to have a resolution to this that works for St. Francis, that works for the buildings, that works for the community, and that Arch stands ready to be part of that with ideas that we have been suggesting to them.
Could some of the uses that the city normally would put on get into that building, or is it in such repair needs that it's not viable?
That's an excellent question. It depends on the production. And it really does. There are larger productions that may or may not be feasible in that particular venue, but there are things that probably could use that venue. And I do think that venue has been explored by some of the organizations who are displaced. What that looks like, I don't know yet, but yes.
Well, because the more you get into the building, the more you appreciate it.
Yes, it's a gorgeous building.
Yes.
It does not have the backstage that the Arch United Center has.
No, it does not, yes.
And that's, one thing that St. Francis would consider.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you allowing shows clear until the June start date, or are you clearing things out now in preparation for the construction?
Sure. We are doing a little bit of both. So there are many things in this building that have been in the building for 50 plus years that, we're doing a little house cleaning. But there are many components that really can't be moved until after the last production closes. So it is going to be a very busy week or two after the last performance closes, because every single curtain needs to come down, every speaker needs to come out of this building, every light fixture needs to come out of this, out of the stage house. It will be at the end of May, yes, so. Yes, like cleaning your garage times, I don't know. Yes.
You mentioned that there was a historical prototype lighting control that this Eisenhower had developed.
Yes.
Is that still in the building?
Unfortunately, is not.
Because
And
that's the kind of thing one would hope would go to a museum, not scrapyard.
yes, there actually is a theatrical lighting. There are actually a couple of theatrical lighting museums. One of them is in Wisconsin, and at the a manufacturer known as Electronic Theater Controls. And so oftentimes when venues, and I don't know if it happened in this case because that piece of equipment was gone before I started with the organization, but it is pretty common in the industry that if a venue is disposing of equipment like that, they put it out there to the network to say, does anyone want to put this in their museum, that sort of thing. Just making sure that those, at least an example of those developments have been preserved across time.
So surely that first one got into a museum.
I think so. I mean, Yale, I'm pretty sure that Yale or Pennsylvania would have saved it, so yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.